Hey guys, Axel with the Star Wars guy here. Now if you're new here, this has been a weekly series where I take a look at the newest Star Wars show called The Bad Batch. If you like, there's a playlist to all the episodes so far, so please feel free to check it out. Getting right into this episode, this one that, maybe not the best ever, has felt the most like the Clone Wars thus far. For once, this episode does not focus on our main cast of clone troopers, but instead a family of Twi'leks, and I'm sure the next one will too. But I'll get to that later. The Empire's holding another rally on Ryloth, where we see a ton of familiar faces. Rampart and Crosshair's team is here. They seem to be worried about insurgent groups, as this was a planet that used clone troopers, but also used a bunch of local people as well. Crosshair's here to literally snipe out any resistance. The Senator, Orn Freytaux, gives a speech much like Avi's seen from the previous episode, except he doesn't speak out against the Empire. I sort of expected that. He has been shown to be a rather selfish individual, even going as far to tell people to give their weapons to the Empire. His people are not too happy about this. It seems like one rock throw away from becoming a riot. The crowds ask that Cham Syndulla, who is pretty much the leader of the local Ryloth military. I was expecting Cham to pull in Avi, but instead he actually agrees. His main objective has always been peace, and it seems to be here, though you can tell he's not sure about all of this. But he does trust his clone trooper friends. Rampart tells Cham's wife how much of a shame it is that their daughter couldn't witness the Empire and Ryloth's reunion. She sort of blows this off by saying, Hera has other interests. Yes, this is Hera's mother, Eleni Syndulla, for her first screen time appearance. There's a few episodes in Star Wars Rebels centered around Hera about some of her family stuff, but I don't remember them actually saying what happened to her mother. She does look a lot like Hera. That's when we segue into this episode's main focus, Hera. Chopper is here too. A while ago there was a mention about an Imperial mining establishment, and Hera's supposed to be spying on it. She soon ends up daydreaming about flying, and that gets her caught. The clone commander, Hauser, returns her home with the warning, I won't report this time, but please don't let this happen again. Hera gets slightly scolded by this. Eleni wants Hera to tell her everything she saw. This is obviously about more than Hera being in places where she shouldn't be, at least for her. Cham, however, thinks this was a very reckless move on Gobi Glee's part. I sort of neglected to mention him thus far. So far, he's not been super noteworthy, but he's a friend of Cham's. Hera even calls him Uncle. Apparently, this guy is also number one on suspect list for insurgent groups mentioned earlier, because the Empire literally calls them Gobi's men. But anyway, Gobi makes a decent point in this argument. He states that Hera is just a kid, and they wouldn't be able to prove that she's spying on the construction. But Cham blows this off for the safety of his daughter. Elsewhere on Ryloth, the Imperial crew are having a discussion. Rampart was just as surprised as I was that Cham didn't immediately start a riot, though the Senator isn't impressed by how his people hold Syndulla in such high regards. Crosshair with visible burns on the side of his head, ugh, so cool looking, reminds the Senator that Gobi Glee is the real threat. But Orn knows who the actual real threat is, as Gobi is loyal to Cham, and so are his followers. He thinks that they must be dealt with. Rampart pretty much tells Orn Freytaux to be the one to deal with it. Now it's time for Cham to talk to Hera. Here we see that Hera listens to Gobi a lot. She seems all for this fighting for Ryloth's peace, whereas Cham just wants peace period. He tells her that in the end, him and Gobi want the same thing, but come at it at very different angles. He wants more for his daughter. He doesn't want her to fight, and he's going to get a face full of disappointment later, but he'll be so proud of her at the same time. An undisclosed amount of time later, Rampart shows Cham and Eleni the facility, where Eleni notices flat out that they're being lied to. This was not supposed to be a military-run mining place, but it has cannons, so it is. She tries to catch Rampart in this, but Rampart gives her the whole, under the Republic you were vulnerable, now with the Empire you aren't, and we only have your best interest in mind. Yeah, okay. But we also get a confirmation, if it wasn't clear already, that Eleni is sort of on Gobi's side as well. She questions if the peace is worth what they will lose. And what if it's not something that they can accept? It's Hera's side of the story time. Her surrogate uncle pretty much manipulates her into going on a supply run with him, promising her she'll be able to fly the ship. No takeoffs or landings though. Damn it, that was the best part. I thought it was pretty funny that they switched seats mid-flight. Like, could you imagine being on the road and doing that? It's just a funny image of struggling to get out of the seat while keeping your eyes on the road at the same time. But Hera tells Chopper to cover for her. This is important in a minute. They lift off, and sneaky Crosshair bugs the ship. I believe it's a tracker/comm unit so they can hear what's going on. The trip is really short, only to Ryloth's moon, and this is where we meet our heroes in this episode. The Bad Batch exit their ship and give the Twi'leks their supplies of more blasters and thermal detonators. Sounds like a fun grocery store trip. Hera's taken with the guys' ship, and she also sees Omega with them. Omega shows her around the ship, and Hera's just amazed that they live here. Never mind that this ship is relatively small, and the sleeping arrangements cannot be very comfortable. But anyway, Gobi asks them to tell Cid to send more whenever she can. Hunter tells Gobi building an arsenal draws attention, and to make sure that he knows what he's up against. They part ways. Earlier, Hera told Omega that flying was all about this feeling she gets, and Omega relays that info to the guys. I wish we could have seen their faces, because they totally have no idea what she's talking about. They're so confused. We skip to them flying above the ground. They spot 2 Imperial starfighters, and they have their ship stay low, which probably saves their lives. Sneaky Crosshair shoots them down. They're arrested and taken away. Crosshair notices 2 of Gobi's men out there watching, but Rampart has plans for them later. Chopper relays all the information to the Syndulas, and they start a small revolt. It doesn't take real long for them to steal a transport carrying the prisoners and the Imperials to surrender. Cham guards them and is about to off Senator Ornfried Ta for giving him and Hera up to the Empire. Despite Hera having almost nothing to do with this, only being guilty of association. Eleni stops Cham from doing this though, knowing he will have his time, but not as a straight up murder, like this would be. This is all part of Rampart's plan though. He has Crosshair shoot the Senator and blames it on the Syndulas. Eleni calls for Chopper to take Hera and make a run for it. Of course, they're all arrested, and that's pretty much where this episode ends. Obviously, a cliffhanger. So a few things about this episode. I noticed how the clone trooper Hauser is very hesitant about taking orders from Rampart and other Imperial members. I also noticed how he's the only colored clone trooper here, probably to symbolize his intentions, maybe to show that he hasn't quite fallen to Order 66 yet. Either way, I like the bluish green color he had on him. Comment down below what your theory on what his deal is. It was really interesting to be back on Ryloth. It didn't take me back to Clone Wars Season 1 much because I don't actually remember much about those episodes, but it's an interesting parallel. Both Season 1s have Ryloth in it, except in Clone Wars, Cham wants to fight. In Bad Batch, he's done fighting. Character progression. Until Rebels, where he wants all the Stormtroopers to die. Though I do admit it was more interesting to see Hera and her mother. I wish I had more to say about Hera, but she's pretty much what I thought she would be as a kid. Head in the clouds, heart of gold, and a fiery spirit. I love the character, but I just don't find much to talk about. Same goes for her mother, but I don't think her character had a bunch of time to shine. Seemed like she was on screen just long enough for us to care and to understand where she stands with the Empire. But unfortunately, we don't get much else. Lastly, there's an elephant in the room I wanted to address. It's something that's been bothering me for a little while now, at least 2 or 3 episodes. Why are all the heroes only shooting with stun? Okay, Star Wars Rebels I sort of understood. It was a show for kids 6 to 12, for a younger age group than some other Star Wars content. But here, a sequel show that has a bunch of death and sometimes gets very dark, it just doesn't work at all. Especially since it has the same art style, I expect to see all these clones drop like pennies like they used to. In this episode, we literally see Crosshair's burned head. A few episodes ago, we saw him getting burned alive. That was pretty dark. Star Wars might be for kids, but that has never stopped them from showing dead stormtroopers. This is some George Lucas, Greedo shoots first because Han isn't a cold-blooded killer type logic. But I don't want to end this on a negative note. I don't think this was the best episode ever, but it still felt very much like Clone Wars. It would be nice to get more episodes like this, focusing on other characters, where the only thing loosely tying these stories together is the Bad Batch themselves. But not all the time. That's about it, guys. If you like this video, please smack that like button, blast that subscribe button, and if you would like to keep up to date with this series, then please ignite that bell icon. Until next time,